Hello, I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and this is the Intuitive Pull Podcast, where together we'll embrace the plans we did not make yet, unfold businesses and lives that are so much greater in wealth in all ways than any business or life plan could ever achieve. My wish is that you make intuition your most trusted advisor. So buckle up, get present, and let's go. So it gives me so much joy to be here with Cameron Stewart. I spoke about Cameron in the Wholehearted Man many episodes back where I wrote his story. I originally wrote his story so that Cameron would be able to see himself through the eyes that I see him as. And then it inspired me to share his story. But this time we actually have the real deal. He's with me here and with you. So thank you, Cameron, for being here and for your generosity, hey? Such generosity.
Yeah, we'll see how we go, shall we?
So I actually just wanted to start with some of the writing that I wrote for you as a bit of a warm-up, and then we'll just see wherever we go. So I wrote this, I think it was the end of last year. So you started coaching, I can't believe it was all the way back. I didn't realize it was July.
Yeah, July 21.
Gosh, time flies when you're having fun.
Well, I don't know if some of it wasn't fun at the end of last year, I tell you, but yeah, time does fly.
So I wrote this, it was probably about 3 months down the track or 2 months down the track of starting coaching. And so this is the beginning of what I wrote. I write this piece to honor a man who chose to take his safety harness off, to dive into the deep and come to know, experience by experience, how tenderness is more valuable than the currency of control and ego-based power. I write this piece to honor a man who came to know that letting go of control would be the first most powerful strategy to bring about an invaluable return on investment. I write this piece to honor a man who came to know that sharing his vulnerabilities would most likely be the biggest risk of all, more dangerous at first than all the risks he took for financial gain, and this new risk would pay the most meaningful and profitable dividends. I write this piece to honor a man who came to know that leading his life from a place of acceptance and transparency from the all of him, and not just the facade that most men expose, would be the second most powerful strategy. This would enable another form of ROI, an investment not just for him, but for others in the ripples of impact created by him. I write this piece to honor a man who came to know that history would be healed and rewritten from the present moment of compassion and forgiveness for past misunderstandings and hurt. I write this piece to honor a man who Googled, "How do I love myself?" when the very choices described above were the very acts of love for self. I met this man who represents so many men like him in meditation 2 years ago. It took me 2 years to ready myself so that I could meet him in physical reality, and it has indeed been one of my greatest joys. So welcome, Cameron.
Thank you. Yes.
What does that feel like to hear me say that out loud?
I think it highlights how far that I feel I've come in terms of the way that I approach life. So in the beginning, a lot of my fear and anger and stress and was driven by thoughts, and now through what I've been through in the last 9 months, it certainly brought out a case of being able to be aware of those thoughts and why I'm thinking them, where they originated, and to be able, to turn that around into a position where love for thyself is first and foremost, then to be able to deliver on all the things that I have in my life. So, it was quite they talk about it awakening. They talk about, when you're at your lowest point, something has to force you into that position of awareness and becoming conscious. And I certainly felt at that point there was no going back. So to hear those words and to hear them written at that time and to hear what was going through my thoughts and how I presented to you in that time, and getting my head around all this, how far I've come from that time.
I love that. For a man, I call you my wholehearted man.
Yes. It's all there.
Not many men would say that one of the most fundamental things is to love thyself.
Well, I think there's no other answer. Like I mean, I've chased money my whole life. I've chased success, and I've chased things of a monetary and value which society places on. But I've never found happiness there, and all I've felt is fear. And the journey has never been a pleasant one. It's always about trying to get somewhere. So I suppose I've just come to the realization there's no other choice out there, and that is the answer. So if you're looking for the answer, it is to look inwards rather than outwards. And I've always looked outwards. And growing up and going through school and university and early work life, and that is all we're taught is it's external success and monetary value and social status. And I've had all of that, I suppose, and it hasn't brought me the joy or the peace to be happy. And so I have to find another way, and I'm well on the way to finding it.
Yes, and I really want to start actually by asking you to share with us, where were you when you first started? Because, for me, the inspiration, as you know, to work with you and men like you was because I felt so much compassion when I was in meditation one time, because I could feel the pain. I could feel the pain of placing so much emphasis on monetary success, on self-worth, and what happens when things aren't going well, and what happens to self-worth when things aren't going so well. So I did feel, before coming on with you, I really felt your generosity for being here, because there are going to be men that listen to this and who are going to recognize themselves by your generosity, through your generosity. So where were you when we first began, or even before we first began? Where were you?
I got myself into a situation from a business point of view, which I recognize all the signs now in terms of the behaviors that I was expressing at the time. But there was this shiny new toy of a new business which I wanted to get involved in. There were these two great people who had fallen out with their previous guy, but had this fantastic concept, and I believed that I could join up with them, be with them, and create a business and help them, and I would be successful, they would be successful, and we would sail off into the sunset on our yachts. Now, yeah. So I recognize a couple of points, from the work that I've done in terms of I was being a rescuer. I was seeing that I loved the fact that I could come in and sort of help out from a monetary side of view. And I know that extends way back in my life. And that was one of the mistakes I had made, being trying to be a rescuer. The other one was, this ego point of view that I'm this fantastic businessman because I've had success in the past. So I entered into a business relationship, with totally the wrong context, and because I attach a lot of my emotional safety and security to monetary, it started going south at a great rate of knots, and I was losing control. So my control went out the window. I could see monetarily wise this was going to be expensive. So I started to spiral again. Yeah, I just spiral, and it repeated a pattern that I've had several times in my life, where if I suffer financially, I project, or I think that I'm going to, and that I'm in a corner, I will move to a place of great fear and anxiety. So the anxiety was hitting hard. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't sleep, and nothing at that stage had happened, but I was predicting. So I was not conscious and thinking forward, and also in a place of losing control and realizing this was not going to work as I saw it.
Had you not seen the signs and not opened up, where do you think you would have been?
If we hadn't,
yeah,
I would still be the anxiety would have got worse. I wouldn't have been able to recognize the signs of why this is happening. I have learned now why this is happening, and I've become aware of these feelings that I have and what are causing them. So if I hadn't taken the path that was given to me by yourself, I would still be in a spiral of living my life unconsciously and relying on my next financial success to try and bring me joy, which I've learned is not really possible, because once you have it, you're looking for the next step and the next step. And so the spiral and the roller coaster ride of my life, depending on my financial stability, would have continued. And I'm sure, the early exit doors would have been springing because of the stress and anxiety that I was bringing to my body. So, yeah.
Thank you for your honesty, because I just feel it was really important to say that, because I know that people who are listening will be recognizing themselves here, and through your example will see a different way.
Well, that's the idea. Like, my dad died when he was 57. I'm 45. I've had to make this was a turning point for me to make some serious decisions in my life, how long I'm going to stick around for. Unnecessary stress from anxiety from trying to attain something which I'll never achieve and is so superficial anyway. Why am I doing that? So to be able to pivot and take this direction where I am now focusing inwards and focusing on myself, and starting to look after myself from an anxiety point of view, from a physical point of view, from a health point of view, is key, because I have children and I don't want them to go through what I went through in terms of losing my dad early.
Can you talk to us about where this identity around, in your words, when we were, in the early days, you talked about you having this rock star identity around money, about being a rock star at making money. And, you found your illusory emotional security in that. Where did that identity come from?
Looking back and evaluating, and this is what's been great over the last 8 months, to understand where all this comes from. My childhood was not the best. I had my mother leave me and my brother when I was 5, and she moved overseas. So I was left with my father, and she returned 3 or 4 years later, and then went back to living with my mother. My father had all the money, my mother did not. And so whenever we went to visit my dad, it was always a case of he would take us, and it would be every other weekend, maybe. He would take us to the best places, take us to the Sheraton, and we'd swim in the pool, or to the restaurants, and we'd go out and he'd give us money at the end. And so looking back, growing up, I went to boarding school, and I went through school, and started to become, I really assimilated with the safety and structure of boarding school. My childhood, all that was in environments which were, full of domestic violence. And so going to somewhere like boarding school gave me the structure and safety that I needed to thrive. And I started to gain confidence and grow. And then that continued when I went through university. And then, my first job out of university, I finished university on a Friday, and I started Monday in a stockbroking firm. So I then worked in stockbroking for 10 years, got promoted through to managing director of a firm in Sydney, being transferred there. So the financial success was now taking over. A lot of people were like, wow, look at him, wow, he's doing well. I was popular, people could see what I was doing, and I was well ahead of the curve in terms of where I was. So that became my safety net. That became my emotional blanket, was the financial success that I was achieving. And that has continued. I left stockbroking 2012 and had various ventures. I've done farming, I've done finance broking, and various other property developments. So when things go wrong and I'm financially threatened, because the foundations that I've built for myself are completely wrong. They're not built around me and myself and my life. It's about my financial life, or my working life, and that's where I've got confused. So the last 8 months have made me realize what is important. Whilst I can still do those things, they don't define me. And
Mm.
I've done a lot of work just trying to define who I am and why I am, and the compassion I have for myself and for my parents has been an important part of that rehabilitation, is to show compassion for them, because as a parent, I've got two boys. I don't know what the hell I'm doing most of the time. They didn't know what the hell they were doing most of the time, and for all the pain that I was put through, I've got to forgive them to be able to forgive myself. So that has been part of the learning, and then to put that into place, and then to turn in and on myself, and instead of these negative thoughts that come through from my ego and from my pain body, which has been very well developed over the last years, to be able to turn that tide and become aware of my negative thoughts. To just be aware is enough, and try and stop the cycle of thinking that way. So yeah,
Mm.
that's it. I mean, the realization that I've had is that, like, all these thoughts that I have and about my life are completely not me. They are from an ego sense or a pain body sense of me, which is my brain. Like, there is my being, which is completely separate from the way that my brain delivers these fearful messages. And so to understand that there's actually, my being, and then there's my brain, to know that not everything that comes from my brain is correct. It's just been such a salvation, and such a blessing to understand that it's not always right what you think. Your body tell you what is right, and you don't always believe your brain. I think that's important.
I love how you've just described that.
Yeah, I don't know where it came from. It came from my brain. No, it came from my body.
Yeah, it came from your beingness, right? Not
Well,
from...
it is, and we talk about gut instinct, and we talk about feeling, and when you do that, and separate yourself from your thoughts and from your mind, it's a very powerful tool to be able to then, when you are in a panic mode, to detach yourself from that.
Mm.
It's a lot of hard work, and it's undoing 40 years of thinking and 40 years of behaviors, but yeah, it's on its way.
It's a pretty major thing. I mean, I remember the conversation that we had when we really hit into, the story of your mum leaving you when you were a young boy, and you uttered words to me that you'd never said before, and that, you were saying to me, I remember you said to me, I can't understand as a father how a parent can leave their children. And then the words that came out of your mouth then were, I must have been the sideshow. I mustn't have mattered that much. I must have been the sideshow for my mum to leave me, not only leave me, but even leave the country that I was in.
Yeah.
And I remember that was a really cathartic experience for you. I remember, it was a big moment, and you really took that and took that into your evening. And I remember you said, you had quite an emotional moment sitting by the fireside, being with all of that. Can you talk to us about that? And I realize this is really personal. So again, I just...
No, it's fine.
really
Like, I have no problem, because
yeah.
I have no problem. The time was it was when I was 5, and just realised and was told that my mother had gone, and realising that when I say sideshow, it's like, well, why did I not matter? Like, why? How could you do that? But I don't like. I think I've come to the realisation, as I mentioned before, like, I don't understand what pain she was going through herself. In terms of her upbringing, I do know she was adopted. It's hard to know exactly what was going on, so I have to look at that now and feel compassion rather than anger for her situation at the time. Nobody would do that unless there was a good reason, is what I tell myself. And it probably wasn't about me. It was about the situation. Yeah, I think that's important to understand, to show compassion for her and for my father, for me to move forward and realize that, yes, things happened which were wrong, but that wasn't and shouldn't be what defines me, and it wasn't my fault.
That was a real moment of freedom for you, wasn't it?
Well, it was. And just the way that you helped me understand the aspects of, they didn't do it to hurt you. They did it because they didn't know any different, or they were struggling in themselves. And that was quite a key moment in terms of coming to grips with myself and love for myself, because I could see that, yeah, it wasn't about hurting me, although it did. That's not what they were trying to do.
I just got something that I haven't seen before. Being adopted myself.
Yeah.
Right. I've just seen something.
Yes.
And so, at the core, adoption is abandonment, right? At the core.
Yeah.
The core. And so that's what the one who's adopted learns at the core, maybe not consciously, right? We're not thinking about it, but at the core,
No.
when it hurts, we want to abandon because that's what we've learned.
Yes.
And I can even tell that within myself in my own life. If, even what I was talking to you about before about organizing a retreat in Croatia, when it wasn't kind of working, I was ready to abandon the idea.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a simple example. And so when things weren't working out for your mum, her default is to abandon.
Yeah.
Right. It's just in the psyche until it's not anymore, until it's not. And thanks to you and through the choice that you made, love transmutes all.
Well, that's right.
And
that's right.
You gave your mum a great gift by no longer holding on to that pain and no longer holding on to the misunderstanding or the judgment, and therefore no longer holding on to the identity of who you think you had to become in order to feel safe in the world, which was never going to be true safety. And so I remember, the timing's always so uncanny, isn't it? I just marvel at timing. Like, we could never plan this stuff out. We could never, we just don't have the intelligence to plan this stuff out. And here we are, at that time talking, and your mum was not well.
No. And it was a case of she's never been well. And it was, I don't know, you just triggered a thought then. When she moved she left the country, she left New Zealand, she moved to Brisbane. She fell downstairs, which was the start of all her health troubles back in 1983, and has had constant problems with her health, back pain, all this sort of stuff. So she had been in hospital for about 7 months, up until the time that I started talking to you. And I was not talking to my mother for various, reasons that have, we could be here today, I'm sure. But it was a case that she was failing and starting to go downhill. And I remember talking to her just about a month before I started talking to you, Giselle, and the way that she was just so low. I'd never heard her that low before. So I made sure that I then turned around and, after I'd started talking to you, go and visit her, because it was necessary to see her, and see the boys and try, because I sounded like she'd given up, and I didn't want her to give up. So after we had started talking, and I remember you were, you've got to come to you were telling me about coming to a place of passion and saying, you've got to tell your mother how you feel and that you love her. And it's such a foreign concept to me. I hadn't said that I love my mother for a long period of time, because I've been so angry with her, for various things, not just what happened all those years ago. And I was petrified to do it. It was not something that I could feel. I don't know, and so to be able then to come from a place of compassion and forgiveness, to say those words were a lot easier. And then, the trip was getting planned, and then unfortunately, I get a call on a Saturday morning that she'd into a coma after the previous operation, and that she was on life support, and it's probably best. So that I head up north. It's 5 hours drive to Lismore from where we were. Got there at about 3 o'clock on a Saturday, and so I sat with her and just told her how I felt about her and how I loved her and how I forgave her. And she was unconscious, but I was talking to her constantly, holding her hand, and I spent the last 36 hours with her until she passed the following day. And I do believe she was holding on for me to get there, and I do believe that she heard me. And I think to watch her pass, and they took the machines off, and I stayed with her until just about her final breath. That we popped out and she knocked off, as we're out of the room, as people tend to do sometimes.
Yes.
But that was a very cathartic experience for me to be able to voice and tell her and break down and cry and hold her and see her in such a vulnerable state, which gave me such peace to be able to release that energy, the negative energy that I've been holding for such a long period of time. So that, to be able to say goodbye and give her and tell her how much I loved her was fantastic, both of us. And it was, it was a magic moment. I wouldn't want it any other way in terms of saying goodbye. If I didn't have that opportunity, I would probably still be full of that. And it was her time. She was sick. And that was that.
Yeah. And do you remember what I said about your mum, the next time she comes into this life? Do you remember what I said about that?
You might just have to let me and the audience know that one. I can't.
I mean, this is thanks to, gosh, I'm one of Susie de Jong's biggest fans as well.
Yes, she's
spoken about her so many times. My gosh,
a legend.
And she taught me this, because her mother had already passed, and then she went through her own untangling around, in her own story, in her own way, where she came to a place of nothing left but love. And I said to her, because I'd never seen it before, I said, when your mother comes into her next life, you've released her. She doesn't need to go and play that role anymore, because you've transmuted fear. You've transmuted it such that there's nothing left but love. So right. Karma, right? She doesn't have to come back into that same karma. And it's the same thing with your mum. Like, talk about an act of unconditional love. Talk about an act of generosity. To be so vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable with her.
Yes. But you're right. And it was an unconditional love act, but it was also an unconditional love act for myself to be able to give myself that release and to, as you say, remove all of the what was hanging over me. So it was necessary for both of us for it to be done, and I'm so glad that it happened.
Yeah, me too. As I said, the timing, you can't plan this.
Oh well, we can't. No, it is quite freaky and divine intervention.
Totally.
At its best.
Totally. I've got the words, you said it was earlier on in the piece, and you said something like when you're really suffering, you said, I'd give it all up for peace. I'd give everything up.
Yeah. Well, that's right. And so I was driven, and you reach such a low and such a point of anxiety, and each low gets lower. And I remember when we first talked, and you said, not that you need to do something, but if you don't do something, these lows are going to get lower. The anxiety spiral just will continue to go lower and lower and lower. And so I just, I reached my low point. I reached that point where I can't do this again. There needs to be some intervention to stop this feeling that I'm feeling, because it was just, the anxiety was just. So I was happy to give up everything to stop that feeling. And luckily I don't have to give up too much. And luckily it was a change in the way that I approached it, a change in the way that I think about things.
But the thing is, the reason why I was bringing that statement up now is because you did give things up. You didn't have to give up, your life.
No.
You did give up a whole lot of identity.
Well, exactly. I suppose.
You gave that up.
Yeah.
And that's why you have peace.
That's right. You're 100% right.
And I remember, we had our first conversation, and the first time we met on the phone, and and it's quite a big investment in lots of ways, right? Time, energy, money, everything. And had never actually met me. We'd only had one conversation. And then I remember you called me, I don't know, maybe a few days later, before you'd actually committed. And I said to you, I remember really barracking for you. And I'm saying this here, not only for you to hear this again, but also for those who are suffering to hear this. I remember saying to you, if you're all in, right? If you're all in, that you will be free in 3 months. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Because I know that. I know that that's how this works. I've been through, my own story, and I just know once we are able to take 100% personal responsibility and get out of being victim and go to that place of being cause for our reality, and we go to that place of vulnerability and compassion and forgiveness, and we see that actually we experienced all of that in order for us to experience the peace that we've not been able to experience. And when I said peace, I meant PIECE, but actually it's PEACE. You
Yes.
can't get to experience that PEACE until we've chosen it, until we've chosen it.
Yeah, well, you're 100% right, and the piece around self responsibility and taking responsibility for your actions, and the turnaround that it takes, well into it after 3 months, and you've got to be careful not to then go, oh well, I'm all fixed. I know we had that conversation, but it's true. Like the turnaround, and it's all about what you put into it. I was so motivated to get away from that feeling. I never wanted to feel it again. So putting in and taking self responsibility for it is such an important piece. The acceptance that yes, this is an issue and it won't go away without doing some major shifts in the way that you approach and shed identity. But the thing is that the benefits from it are huge, and it shouldn't be a thing that you're scared of. Look, I was more scared before than I will ever be again. Like I have this basis of stability and peace now, which I didn't have before. So I agree with you. The turnaround time can be quick, and I was committed. I was, as you know, I was reading stuff before I was quoting back stuff to you, and you're like, well, he's been doing his work, but that was important. I was not going back to that place. I was not going back to that place, and I benefited from that in a rather quick period of time. Thank God.
Ah, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Such a privilege to have been in, and still I am in your corner. Like such a privilege. And thanks to you, because as I've shared in previous episodes, you were my cave that I feared to enter. I was scared of people like you that were so powerful and masculine,
and I was so fascinated when you told me that, because I find you do not come across that way at all, and it just goes to show what we think in our heads sometimes, and the feelings and thoughts that we have are not what other people see.
Yep.
And that's a big part of what I've come to realize as well. As simple as that sounds, what drives a lot of my behavior is fear of what other people think. But it's only I have learned a lot about that, and for you to think that about me, I was just like, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. As I said, it's been such a privilege. Such a privilege. Thank you.
No, thank you. I mean, it's been great, and the way that you approach things, and bringing it back to me, and bringing it back to choices that I make that are best for myself, and coming from a place of love. These are all terms that I never really chose, or it was all about keeping up with the guy next door or my mates from university who are making serious money, or house prices are running, why don't I own more houses? Like all of those sorts of thoughts tend to disappear when you focus inwards, and you lose all of that, and it's a shedding of an identity which I don't want to need anymore. You can still make a difference, and you can still do wonderful things in terms of your business. It's just you're coming from a lot calmer, a place of love, and a lot more controlled place, without reacting from a place of fear. And I was terrible at reacting from a place of fear, and I sometimes do slip into that. Coming from a place of love is a lot clearer way to do it, and you'll get much better results if you do it that way.
So speaking of, can you tell us about what has happened as a result of loving yourself?
Oh, what's happened?
Yeah, there's lots of this. This is the bit that I'm excited a bit too, because when I wrote your story, we went up to this bit. This hadn't been written yet.
No,
it hadn't happened yet.
No, well, it's. I think you're referring to the work that we did at the end started 6 months ago. We've got property that we develop, and we also own a property, and it's like holiday units, and we had the last tenant, because of COVID, went out the back door, and I woke up one day and I thought, after reading the newspaper, the shortage of housing that happens in holiday areas. Port Macquarie is an area where people go on holiday, and over Christmas, Easter, over Iron Man, you cannot get a place. Rooms are $500-600, and especially over somewhere like Christmas when you've got families coming together, and families sometimes don't come together very well. A lot of domestic violence activities occurring, and the story was on the fact that domestic violence after COVID had exploded, and that they couldn't find accommodation, house prices are running, and a lot of these people are sleeping in their cars. And I just, that story sort of struck a chord with me. So I knew.
And why did it strike a chord with you?
Well, because I could find a solution for these people. We had a property which would be perfect for people who have not been on holiday before. It's right next to the beach. It's got a pool. It is a property that would work for them. And to think that these people are suffering as they were, and we had a solution right in front of us, which would work for them. It took a while to be able to get into a place where working with non-government organisations, the government, and also domestic violence services to get them in there. So it just made sense. So from a business point of view, here I was providing and helping all of these people. We have like 18 units that can hold these poor people who suffer at the hands of people who are out of their mind, who are unconscious, doing these horrible things to other people in society. Yeah, I just thought, well, hey, we can actually help these people. We can. And so I called the head of the services in Port Macquarie, and she like, my God, yes, like whatever it takes, we'll. And so we spent 2 or 3 months just trying to figure out how we could do this on a commercial basis for us, because we are investors, but also in a way that can help these people. And we got there, and we managed to strike a deal with them moving in on the 1st of November last year. So a lot of people who, through Christmas period, who would have been sleeping in their cars, suffering at the hands of their husbands, wives, and putting up with it, they now had a place to live through the provider of domestic violence services. And so we've been doing that now. We're up into the 7th or 8th month, and the stories that we hear, and when I visit the property, staff are just like so thankful. They love the property. They care for it. It is an older style. It's like a 1980s units. It would get low rankings on booking.com, but it's perfect for this type of situation where the pool is there. There's kids swimming in the pool. They are getting results. They are getting results for people leaving and transitioning. So the whole idea is that obviously you have emergency accommodation for people who are the first night to the first week out of a very bad situation. They then, once they have decided to leave, need to transition. They need to get a rent history. They need to get a job. They need to build up a new life somehow. So we provide that accommodation for up to 3 to 6 months. Usually it's 6 months. We've seen with the model that we've got there, people are leaving after 3 months onto their new lives. And what can be credited to that is because they're all grouped, and this hasn't been done before. To have 18 units, the ladies or the victims who have been there for 3 to 6 months are helping the ones who are just arriving. So they are showing them the way. They're showing the way to get out of this cycle that they've been in an environment where the beach is across the road. There's a pool for the kids to swim in, and we're seeing results in this which just have not been seen before. So we had, even last week, we had the Minister for Domestic Violence for the New South Wales State Government visit the property, and this is the next step. There's funding to upgrade the property. We are looking at committing the property to 15 years to the government to grow this and to make it even more successful. So, and I say all of this, this all comes, and it's still on commercial terms where we as landlords are still getting a return. So it can be done from a social aspect where you can help people and make it work. And the buzz that you get when you even the minister is like, you guys are just doing an amazing job. We never see this. And to see people, kids swimming in a pool, yeah, it's fantastic. It's a great outcome from a thought that just originated from reading a news story.
And, so the commercial, your commercial genius, right? You didn't have to give that up.
No.
But it's fueled by something else now.
Well, exactly right. And so we've just leased our second property to the same group as well, at which I'm actually, and it's, the more I think about it, I'm thinking, okay, well, there's another tranche of government funding which could expand this property and provide even more housing, more quality, gardens for the mothers to garden in, pools for the kids to swim in, and it can all be done, in commercial terms without, everyone's winning. Like, this is the thing. So it's a partnership between government and private investors and community services, which will deliver these great products. So yeah, and for me, you talk about a way forward which provides a social good as well as we're from a business point of view. This is a great model, and it has all come about from changing that viewpoint on how to look at things and becoming more open to, look, I've always wanted to help people and I always do help people, but I think from the transformation that I've had, it's made it a lot easier to do that and to deliver on it and to find ways. Yeah.
And look at the ease.
The ease.
The ease that's here.
That's right. It's not. It is. It all sort of happens because people want to make it happen. These people want to make it happen, and at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of effort going into making lives better for people who are in very, very bad situations. So yeah, it's really good.
It's amazing, isn't it? So when you're aligned, right, which is you're aligned.
Yeah.
Yep. All that stress and striving and struggle and pushing and efforting, and which all creates the anxiety, because you're not making it mean anything about you anymore. Your emotional safety or security isn't based on this. You're already emotionally secure just from loving yourself, from loving yourself and loving what has been unlovable to date.
Yes.
Yeah. The ease is here.
I'm getting out of my way. I'm setting myself aside, and my life and my life situation are two separate things, and so I'm able to deliver a lot better to my life situation because my life is in order and I'm in a lot happier place.
Yeah.
And the decisions that you make are coming from a place of love are a lot better. Like I know making decisions coming from a place of fear are the wrong decisions because I've made them up into seeing you, and that's what got me into a place which I shouldn't have got myself into. That's slowly getting better, and the decisions I'm making there once I look, I'm no saint. I'm still falling in that trap, but I'm aware of it now, and I know when I'm in that trap. So I sort of stop and pull myself back and make the decisions when I'm in a better frame of mind rather than that other frame of mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it is important.
Yeah. And tell us about like the ripples that have happened onto your family.
Yeah, well, the key, I separated from my wife 3 years ago, and the key reason was the impact it was having on my children in terms of our marriage. And I grew up in a pretty substandard environment, and I did not want that for my children. So the fighting and the arguing and the negative energy, I just thought stop. So we moved out, and now I'm in a much better place. I'm a much better friend with my ex-wife than I am married to her. And it's all been about the kids. So every decision, well, a lot of the decisions that we make is about in their interests. So we do that, make sure that they're safe and secure. So the changes that I've made have meant that I and I communicate with my children what I'm going through, and what the struggles that I've had, and I've been trying to get Jack to, because he is very much like me, and I just want him to be a bit more conscious and not project and not sit inside himself, but become more conscious. And he is starting to do that as he grows, and that's wonderful to see them. They're a lot more settled. My relationship with my ex is a lot better. So from a family point of view, things have improved remarkably, and I'm so glad because we can sit here and say, "Oh, I want the best for my children, and I want them to be safe and secure, and I'm doing this," but I was so in my head a lot of the time, and I do remember times when I would be playing games with them, and then I would read an email and it would just set me off, and I wouldn't have remembered for the last half hour what I was thinking because the email had just set me off. And I've become aware of doing that. You just can't do that because these times with your children are very important. So setting that aside and not letting things affect you and pushing you into that fearful place and becoming unconscious around family and yeah, I've learnt that, and so that it's certainly turned the relationships into stronger ones.
Yes, I know, because I know your ex-wife and I know you, and you have such an amazing relationship, better than married couples, most married couples, I'd say. Like truly supportive of each other.
Well, it's important. We'd still have our problems, but you see the children when they can feel something's coming. Like my two fight all day long, and my two kids fight all day long, and then once they see their parents, they just stop, and it's not cool. So I've worked very hard to make sure that, and it's not perfect, but it's good for them to provide them stability and safety, which I never had, and that's all I just want to them. And I'll work with. I'll work with my ex to deliver that whenever necessary. Again, it's not easy. It's not the easiest roads. We still have our disagreements, but
you're human.
Everyone does. Yeah,
you're human. You're human. But what an incredible example of a father you are to your boys, right? So your boys don't have to follow in the footsteps that you were taking up until recently, right? Yeah. What an incredible demonstration. So what about you going forward? Like what do you want? I mean, I know I'm privileged because I know what's going on in your life, and you've absolutely committed to letting go of it, what you've been attached to. You've been absolutely committed to letting go of habits and addictions, and talk about a man that is absolutely committed to living from authenticity and love. What do you want? What would you love? Like where are we going?
I don't know, Giselle.
I'm giving you space here because I know the power of making a declaration.
Yeah.
Right? I know the power of that. It's really creative. It brings things to you. So what would you love?
Look, I mean, I just want to build out on enjoying life now for the reasons of actually enjoying life and enjoying every day of life. I've always looked forward and sort of, I'm not, until I get this, that's been my life starts, and it's completely right. So the focus is that day in, day out, is to try and be as present as possible and try and enjoy it. It's very hard for me because I'm breaking habits with 40 years old. So that is important, and I want to do that. I'd love to meet someone I'd love to meet someone and have a partnership, and it be a partnership which is uplifting for both of us and supporting both of us and effortless and fun. And yeah, that would be a partner in crime to go and to bat with. That's important. Seeing my kids grow and watching them go through school, becoming great young men who are confident and happy and grounded. That's part of it. So yeah, that's what I want.
Ah, gorgeous. I'm so glad that you said that. Is there anything that you would say to men like you? Your parting words. Your boys have arrived?
Yeah.
Back.
They're in the background for the second time.
Final words.
Final words. Look, I think, I mean, if you are in a situation where I was full of anxiety, full of fear of what's going to happen even before it happens, thinking the worst case scenario of most situations, not seeing the positive in any situation, that you need to realize that there is help, not help, but it's all in your mind, and it's all coming down to letting your brain take control of your being, which is not natural. Like this is what I've learned. Like I've always trusted my brain to make all the decisions because that's my brain. That's what the brain does. But the brain is all in it for itself. It's only there to look after its ego and its pain body, and you've got to break that cycle. And when you do break that cycle, and become aware of it, these aren't massive changes that you have to make. Becoming aware is the biggest one. And once you get that concept, it's life changing. So if you are listening and you are struggling like I was, and things ring here for you in terms of bells, like, just take a step. It's not gonna hurt. And if anything, it's gonna improve. And I recommend it to anyone to be able just to start the process. And again, you're not going to lose anything. It's only going to get better.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Go and enjoy your boys now.
Oh, yes. I'm glad the minibar. See you later.
Thank you from the bottom of my heart, Cameron, for sharing your story so openly and so wholeheartedly. I trust that the listeners have found this episode extraordinarily valuable. And if you have men in your life, please share this episode. This literally could not only change somebody's life, but could save somebody's life. And there's one more thing that I'd like to say. Cameron and I and a whole lot of other people are going on retreat in Kenya in November. The vision actually to go to Kenya, not that I've not been to Kenya before, I've facilitated 2 retreats in Kenya. The vision to go to Kenya was actually birthed through an inspiration that I had of creating a retreat for men and women like Cameron. So if you are pulled to either coach beforehand or come to retreat for the purposes of letting go of identities and pain bodies and anxiety and panic attacks, and you wish to experience the freedom and also the commercial savviness but fueled by love, we can write new futures together. Please reach out to me. There are ways that you can connect with me in the show notes. Thank you. Ciao, ciao.